Now, whereabouts in the world are you coming to me from?
I'm in Kalamalooka or Launceston in Lutruwita, Tasmania.
So that's what it's called. I grew up in Lonnie. So
Where'd you grow up?
all right. I moved there in grade one. I grew up outside Deloraine, then I moved there in grade one. So I'm going to say about 92 and was there until 2010. So I
Wow.
grew up in East Launceston.
There you go.
Um,
I'm in
in,
Invermay.
okay, you know the bike centre? I was literally
Yeah.
grew up like they've cut all the trees down and fucked it up now, but I grew up like that was my running around and playing war and playing army.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
yeah, man. In
Small
May.
world.
Fuck yeah. So
Yeah. It's swank. It's not swanky now, but it's you can tell it's moving from the industrial kind of thing into something else. But yeah.
it it blew me away because I hadn't been back there for a while. Obviously, all my family still lives there. And I remember coming down there and walking around Lonnie. I'm guessing this would have been late 23, and being kind of stunned at like the state of the CBD. Like every third shop was empty. I remember
Yeah.
being like, what's going on here?
Well, people ask me what it's like, and I'm like, it's like being in the 90s, and I'm like, you get the best and the worst of it. So, like, it's it's super laid back, and that's like a massive departure from Melbourne.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's a bit closed-minded and super insular, and that's been an adjustment.
Yeah, yeah. It is nice being able to stagger home from the pub. I mean, probably not to Invermay, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, it was. I do miss being able to go to a gig and then walk home. Like,
It's pretty. It's definitely one of the prettiest little cities going. Like, it's gorgeous.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we go up to the Royal Oak a bit. We've seen a few shows there now, and that's kind of probably where we frequent the most, I'd imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
I played a few shows at Lonnie's nightclub.
Fucking Lonnie's. Are they still calling it Lonnie's?
Yeah, I played with
Yeah,
Smith Street there,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
played with Tyler from Luca Brasi there,
Ah, of course.
and yeah, people are like, "Oh, it's not usually like this," and I'm like, "Oh, okay," and they're like, "Yeah, it's usually like a real like young person's nightclub," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is the hookup,
Yeah, man,
clearly
that
the
was it.
hookup club."
Yeah, and that was the hookup club, and Invermay was where I used to go buy weed. Uh,
Yeah, well, there, yeah, well, there's definitely lots of pot smokers in Tassie, that's for sure, which has been great.
oh, I know. Never have to walk far for a hookup. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
true. So
mate,
true.
so that actually answers a question for me that I was going to get to later, which was because I just watched the video for my Binyagi. Bing
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 eye,
Bing Eye.
Bing eye.
Bing Eye. Thank you. So yeah, and I was like, why did you shoot the video in Tassie? That explains a lot. Okay, so all
Yeah,
right.
that was
So
shot down near Garden Island Creek, like that Signety area.
I looked at that video and once I knew it was from Tassie, I was like, Jesus, that looks cold.
It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. We could have. I say that because I've been living in the south for like nearly 20 years. But when I
Yeah.
came from the north, everything in the south seemed freezing. So now it's like t-shirt, thongs, and I just couldn't have done that 20 years ago. But yeah.
Yeah, I live in Brisbane these days and I have for over a
Yeah, oh,
decade.
wow.
I die whenever I go back to Tassie.
But I tell you what, in summer here, it is like nothing you can experience. Like it'll burn a hole through your shirt if it
Mm,
had a chance.
yep.
And like you'll get mad tans here in summer, and I just didn't anticipate that at all.
Yeah.
I have a
Tassie
thong
sun will
tan.
eat you. Yeah.
Yeah, it burns you. It's like it burns you. It's a bit like Launceston culturally is a bit like North Queensland. So
Hmm.
like Hobart, much more progressive, but here it's like it's
Interesting. I
yeah,
always got because the greens were pretty big when I was it was very redneck as I was growing up, and I feel like the greenies really started coming out hard. In the late half of the 2000s. I remember feeling like it was going quite
I
left
think
leaning. So
Tassie,
that's
I
interesting.
think Hobart's gone that way. I
Really?
think Launceston's still like, um, it's still pretty rednecky, but it's
Okay.
weird. It's weird. Like you go to one spot in Tassie and it's real rednecky. You go to the next town over and it's real like you said, greeny, and then
Yeah.
like it has little local identities
Little
and it
pockets.
changes. Yeah, and you think you're going to run into a bunch of bogans, and it turns out they're real progressive, and you think another group's going to be real progressive, and they turn out to be a bunch of bogans. So you're like, oh, okay.
So how long
It's a
have you
mix.
been down there?
This is be about 18 months.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. So I was the reason I bring that up is because I was first a music journalist down there, way back when,
Really?
between '05 and '08, writing for a street press. And I
Really?
was going to ask if you remembered that, but obviously you won't. Um, yeah, okay. So that's really interesting because the Tasmanian scene is so very interesting because it's so disconnected from everywhere else. But
It's
uh,
it's been in its own little country,
yeah, it
and
is.
it's definitely very insular, and it feels a bit like being in like a state of New Zealand rather than a state of Australia. Like it's a bit. It still feels Aussie, but
Uh,
in it, it's got its own personality, and it's definitely insular. My partner, Danny, she has performed here for years and has a really big following, and down here in particular. And like every artist should grow their capital city and their patch of the world for sure. But like I noticed when we go out and stuff, like kids like come up and flock to it, and then like parents act like they've asked the kids to do it, but then the parents are fans, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh well, it's crazy because it's so insular. So wherever we go, there's always someone who knows her, and it's like, wow, you've this is like its own little thing.
mm. So,
And a lot of good players too, a lot of good musicians.
yeah, oh, always. Um, so mate, I just finished the album Therapy just a few minutes ago before we started the interview. What were some of the biggest challenges in creating it?
Well, we chose to record in Maroubra, which logistically was expensive to just host everyone from one capital city to another. Um, but that sort of we got around that. But I think it was probably the easiest record I ever made, to be quite honest.
Mm.
And I didn't get writer's block in it, which I did in Homelands. I didn't in this. It was like it all just came out like a massive catharsis in a really short period of time. And Stevie Knight said to me, "This, I promise you, it'll be the easiest and funnest record you ever make." And it probably was. It wasn't the labor of love that some of the earlier records were. It was like I'd really found my experience in the studio had caught up to me, and I felt really comfortable in what I was doing, and I felt the work I'd done lyrically over the previous records, I felt came very naturally. Like I felt like I knew what I was doing a lot more than 14 years ago when I did the first record, and the sort of the lack of confidence I had then to now, just from experience, just from time, and yeah. So I don't know if there were any particular difficulties in that way. The next biggest difficulty would have been, I think, we were swapping label representation, and there was just like a period of time where it seemed to lag, and we were in negotiations with a lot of people for a long period of time. So that sort of um, that was probably another thing. So actually the opposite experience this time around. It was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. What was so you worked with Stevie Knight. What were some examples of his influence on this record?
I think the guitar tones are probably like Chasing Ghosts has always had a bit of a tip to the hat towards like bluesy licks. And I think there was, and it's also sort of been driven by acoustic and been um, written in with that in mind. And I guess this change here was the guitar tones. We really moved into like using some Fender sounds, those more classic Fender sounds that we didn't use on previous records as often. A departure from the acoustic guitar, so it just features at a few little moments, just to sort of again, sort of just a tip to the hat to the past records and its origins. Um, but yeah, I think that was one of the big changes, a bit of a departure in tone color and guitar sounds. But then the other, I guess, was really sort of keeping it upbeat, and we were both on the same page about like we wanted sort of 10 tracks that were quick paced and went from the front. And I think we've done that. But if you compare that to previous records, there's a really broad spectrum of sounds, and it sort of started quite slow um, and now it's like moved tempo wise, really upbeat. And you can see that heading in that direction. I think when you look at songs like Busted Lung and Summer,
Mhm.
and this is kind of, I guess, an extension on that sound. And it's a really polished sound, which is quite different for us. You know, the first records were about using recording on tape and sort of reel to reel, like really old fashioned
Mm.
kind of analog sounds. And they were, I think, really lent into that sort of folksy, folk punk earlier stuff I was doing. But then this was the first time really like letting go of a whole bunch of rules around that I'd sort of archaic rules I'd had on myself about how I did music, and sort of leaning into lots of new processes and just being open to them and excited by them. And I was kind of looking for, well, where directionally do I offer this album? I don't want to. I've always sort of offered a different sound to each album, and some sort of evolution. And I've grown up on bands that did that. I've never been into the band that does 8 records that sound the same. That's
Yeah,
just two, sure, but I don't need. I
yeah.
don't like it. Yeah, and I get the risk of the departure or the evolution as well. But I feel like you're telling the same joke twice and expecting
Mhm.
the same laugh the second time round, and it's just never going to hit the same way. So this to me was like when I was thinking about, well, where can I go on this new record? It was about, well, what are all the things that I haven't done? And I was like, well, I haven't done a big shiny record, a really like heavily produced in the by the producer after the performance, you know, with
Mm.
the ear candy and the little Easter eggs. And so the staples I tried to keep were the things like you know, the lyrics, which have always been a big sort of focus in Chasing Ghosts, the lyrical content, some of the storytelling elements, and I think just keeping those sugary hooks, but at the same and backing vocals and crews and things like that. But yeah, bit of a growth, bit of a departure, and leaning into some new sounds and processes.
Yeah. So we were talking before about My Big Eye. That what inspired the actual tracks? I remember this. This seems like this is a pretty pertinent issue with First Nations people.
Yeah, so the track was inspired by a lot of it was inspired by a lot of conversations I'd had with men from all walks of life, all communities, um, and not exclusively Aboriginal communities by any means, just men in general around domestic violence. And when I was younger, there was never any conversation about it, and I never really heard of any of my friends perpetuating violence towards women. And I think it was happening, but whether or not it was expressed or people thought they could express anything, I'm not sure. But there was definitely a change in the last 10 years. And what I noticed was some of my friends that had very redeemable qualities and acquaintances and were doing things that I didn't agree with, that I knew about, and I confronted them on. And I had to think about I can't let it slide. Women are asking us to speak up. Of course, we have to speak up. And
Mhm.
then I was stuck with the difficult challenge of, well, how do you speak up with people that are incredibly defensive? maybe don't want to admit what's happened or find it hard to admit what's happened or fearful of the consequences.
Oh, oh, there, mate, you've frozen. I don't know if you can hear me.
Um,
Okay, wait. Sorry, mate, you just froze about 10 seconds ago, so let's just wind back about 10 seconds.
oh, I was just saying that, what I found in the conversations that I was having, that I was getting from men that were sort of starting to share where they'd been abusive in their relationships
Mm,
was there was a lot of shame, there was a lot of guilt. A lot of all of them actually were victims of domestic violence as children. There was some self-awareness of what they were doing was wrong, but there was also a fear that they didn't know how to change or where to turn to change. And so the conversations, as men, we can't turn away from those conversations. Women have asked us to speak up and to
mm,
call it out. And I think it was doing that in a way that wasn't like, well, you're an unredeemable person and you're no good and you're a monster and you should be put in the bad category. And the
mm,
way I approached it was, well, we want change. I don't need to be right, and you don't need to be wrong. That's without being spoken, established, and it's not important. That's sort of the ego perspective. What's important is that your behavior, in fact, changes, so that
mm,
you don't hurt yourself, you don't hurt anyone else, you don't hurt the people you love, you don't keep the cycle of violence going, and you can actually look yourself in the mirror and have some self-respect and learn new skills and strategies and grow as a person and heal. Because anyone who's obviously acting out that behavior, um, it's easy to condemn them, but to get in and help try and change a person that is difficult is where the work is. And I think we've got really good at condemning and calling out poor behavior, but no one actually wants to get in and do some of the work that
yes.
changes the person. And that's got to be surely the bigger goal is that we're losing, a woman or several women every week or couple of weeks. The statistics are shocking in Australia, and we know in First Nations communities there's an overrepresentation of that, and that's not always by Indigenous spouses. A lot of people are probably, 80% of our marriages on the East Coast are interracial. So quite often it's all races of men, and it's in all categories of wealth. It's in people in poverty, but it's in people that are in the millions of dollars. It's in the
Mm,
police force. It's in the fire brigade. It is amongst this quite a lot, and a lot of men probably don't seek help because they would first have to admit they had a problem, and the shame and all of those things. Now, I guess my place was first I empathized with the victim, and I've seen plenty of DV in my lifetime. In family members and things of this nature. So the first thing was to empathize with the victim, and that's what my Bing Eye was about. But it was also to try and engage men, specifically men, and to talk from one man to another and to talk about getting change and what change means and getting help, and putting those steps in place. And you can't do that with someone if you're constantly in judgment of their behavior, if you cannot find some empathy. So I've always written songs. This is not the first song I've written about domestic violence. An Unmarked Grave for a Russian Dancer, which was written about my grandparents, is a song about domestic violence on the first Chasing Ghosts album. But this song was really about trying to talk to abusers in particular, and you know, and not giving them an out, not giving them a cop out or giving them an excuse, but engaging them and
mm,
engaging. Do you want to change? Is this the life that you want to keep perpetuating? It not only is it illegal and immoral and all those horrible things, but you have to live with this. And
mm,
do you want your kids to go through this? Do you want your grandkids to keep going through this? Where does it end? And usually, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, ends in tragedy.
mm,
And so this was my contribution to the conversation to engage other men in difficult conversations about it's time for you to get some change. And there are responsibilities and accountabilities that'll be dealt with, but will you change? And that is what this whole song is about, is engaging people perpetuating domestic violence and saying, turn away, put your hands in your pockets and walk.
Mm.
Use your feet, get going, get out of there and go and calm down and go and get some help and support, because we can't enable that. We must become emotionally mature people. And this is part of that process as men, that we become emotionally mature, full rounded beings, and it's for everyone's benefit. But the last thing you'd want is, purely you charge someone and you throw them in prison, and a year later they're on the street doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And people sort of have this idea that a punitive punishment is going to make the change. And we know that it doesn't, because
Mm.
it's rampant in society and it's illegal, it's immoral, and it still persists.
Mm.
So, and culturally calling it out is one thing, but people have to understand that skills are required for a person to learn, for them to be able to change. And so it does take some learning, it does take some engagement. And that's what the conversation was about, the song was about. And it was a difficult one to write because of the serious nature, because of trying to be empathetic first and foremost to victims and survivors of domestic violence and not trigger
Mm.
them, but also, um, and I'm certainly not part of any sort of bros club or any of that sort of toxic shit. I'm not into it, but I am into accountability, and I am into a person who's willing to try and grow and
Yeah.
and improve themselves.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like the conversations are so important. I'm 39 years old, so I grew up, I was a child in the 90s. I remember being told to recycle. I don't remember being told don't hit your missus. I remember being told rape is bad. I don't remember being told what consent was. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of that sort of stuff. And I think when it happens within family members, or it happens within people that love, or in some incarnation love one another or care for one another, um, people don't want to see um, their loved ones punished, and sometimes they feel ashamed for what's happened to them or what's happening in their family, and what will people say or think. So there's all these social sort of barriers that stop a person saying, I'm in a dangerous situation and I need help to get out of it." But there's also additional social barriers to uh, that person's done something horrible, but maybe there's a redeemable quality to them we haven't seen yet. And people do make mistakes. People do get the opportunity sometimes, depending on what the circumstances are, to redeem themselves. And I guess that's the group of people I was trying to talk to is, are you going to change?
the one thing that obviously with the First Nations aspect of the band that I wanted to get your opinion of was recently on Anzac Day we had the controversy surrounding the Welcome to Country, and I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Um, Probably two things come to mind very quickly. The first one was I was disappointed that the media referred to um, to self-identified neo-Nazis as hecklers and protesters.
Mm.
I think that shows some of the problem. Um, had they said similar things about other groups, I don't know whether that language would have been used. So the watering down of white supremacy by the national broadcasters, I think, is a problem, especially when ASIO tells us the lion's share of their budget is being spent on preventing white supremacy terrorism,
Mm.
not Islamic terrorism. Those days are gone. We're back to disgruntled middle class white boys who are a bit confused about who they are and where they are. The second part would be um, that some people had less of a problem with neo-Nazis being in their presence than they did with the Welcome to Country. And I think if you have a bigger problem with a welcome to country than neo-Nazis, then it's again that opportunity to self-reflect and think about your values. For those who will hear this or watch this and think, oh, well, I don't like the welcome to country. I agreed with the neo-Nazis. When you say, when you're on the same side as neo-Nazis, you're on the wrong side. That's the first thing to understand. There's no situation in life where a neo-Nazi says something and you agree with them where you are not incorrect. You're in the wrong. Anzacs literally killed Nazis. That's literally what their job was for many years while World War II carried on, was to kill Nazis. And we literally got people that are self-identifying as neo-Nazis with the same beliefs that Nazis have, standing next to so-called patriotic Australians, and they're getting along,
Mm.
and people are not calling it out. Some people had the decency there to call it out because they thought it was abhorrent. Those are normal reactions. Those are the Australian values kicking into place, and that should have happened with everyone. Should have just hunted them fellas straight out of there. When you've got neo-Nazis marching the street in Ballarat, when you've got neo-Nazis up on the Grampians, when you've got neo-Nazis hailing Hitler, which is illegal in Victoria, but doing the sign to hail Hitler in South Australia, we've got a problem. You don't have groups of Aboriginal people um, saying anti-Semitic rhetoric. We don't have that type of hate speech in our community directed anywhere. You don't see uh, us militarizing in that sort of way. We practice our democratic rights to protest, as we always have since we've had citizenship rights.
Mm.
Even before we had citizenship rights, how people protested. But this idea that people are sitting around comfortable with a neo-Nazi, that's not me. I grew up in the punk scene.
Mm.
And we had an ethos. You see a Nazi, you punch him.
Mm.
And it's not, I'm not advocating violence. I'm advocating community defense. That if people are perpetuating hate groups, then I won't be sympathetic when I see them in person. There's no two ways about it. I won't be saying, sitting down and having a debate and wanting a conversation about it. I'll do what everyone else should have done, which is I will react. And it's not like a ego thing. It's just like how are people so comfortable sitting next to
Mm.
neo-Nazis unless they empathize with their beliefs? And if that's where we are, which to some degree it would seem that's the case, then like I'm really concerned about Australia. I'm really concerned that people have forgotten that democracy is for everyone. It's not just for white people, it's for everyone. That representation is for everyone, that it's not just for men or for white people or Aboriginal people, it's for everyone. That people should be able to see themselves in their own society. People should be able to feel free and safe. I don't want non-Indigenous people to feel unsafe, nor do I want my people to feel unsafe. And so there's got to be a little bit of the maturity come back into the conversation, lower the tone, outcast Nazis, push Nazis away, don't make them feel welcome ever. That's so inappropriate. Like it's mental. It's a betrayal of everyone whose grandparents literally fought against Nazis or great
Yeah.
grandparents.
The
And that's my thought.
I had an experience though with the Knotfest prior to this one. So last year around March was in the pit. I was in the pit in Brisbane for Thy Art Is Murder, and there was some prick in front of me with his shirt off with a fucking Nazi eagle on his
Yeah.
back left shoulder blade. And I'm looking around.
No one took him out.
I'm looking around going, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why is no one? All right, fuck it. I went up and tapped the bloke. I'm 6'7" and I'm a weightlifter and I've just left the army after 11 years. I'm a big unit. I
Right.
went up and confronted this bloke and said, dude, what the fuck is that on your back? And so, oh, yeah, I got it when I was young. And I'm like, I totally agree with that. Put a
Put your
fucking
shirt
shirt on
on.
or
Yeah.
put a cover or
Get
cover it
out.
up. Like, if you can afford a $240 concert ticket, you can afford to cover up a Nazi eagle. And what got me was the fucking comfort level. Who the fuck takes a shirt off with a swastika
Insane.
on their back in a music festival in Australia and thinks, it's all fine. We're amongst friends here. Like, get fucked. My
That's
grandfather was shot down
correct.
at Berlin, dropping bombs on Nazis. He
That's
died
right. That's how I
fighting
feel.
Nazis. Fuck
That's
you.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh!
That's exactly how I feel. And I was appalled that so many people were limp-wristed and had their hands in their pockets and sort of aghast. But yet it's like, well, what do you expect when you put Sky News on and you play people these fear-mongering one-liners forever and a day, like that Aboriginal people are going to charge you to go to the beach if you vote for the Voice. That we're going to do
Mm,
this, we're going to do this, we're going to take your home off you, we're going to take your house off you, we're going to, if unfortunately, like when this conversation went down, I posted out the Paul Keating's Redfern speech.
mm,
Um, and I think and I didn't like Paul Keating at the time as a prime minister. I've really changed my perspective on him as time's gone on. Um, but the honesty in what he said then, you just can't find in politics today. So someone coming out and saying, as a white man, as a beneficiary of colonization and dispossession of Aboriginal lands, he just said, yeah. He just said, yeah, we brought the murder, we brought the slavery, we took the children, we brought the disease. Let's just own what is true. And that's the Prime Minister in the 90s
mm,
speaking up, saying the very obvious truth. And somehow, in 30 years, we've regressed away from that to a fiction where we think colonization has helped Aboriginal people. For anyone who's not sure about colonization, let me just put a very simple question to people. If you look all around the globe at countries that have been colonized, point to the one where the indigenous people are doing better than the colonizers, and then I'll agree with colonization.
mm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know a single one. Colonizers do well in colonized countries. Colonized people don't tend to do well. A third of the world's poorest people are indigenous people. It's weird to come from a scene that had Rage Against the Machine telling people the truth for such a long time, and these people would all get up at a karaoke bar and want to sing "Killing in the Name," and then still don't quite get what the lyrics are. These are the same people whose parents listened to Midnight Oil and sung along with all the lyrics, but still thought the Welcome to Country was inappropriate, even though Aboriginal soldiers served, even though Maori people never get the same treatment in New Zealand when they represent themselves. The Pakeha don't boo them, Pakeha don't get offended by them. And it's weird. It's like New Zealanders understand that they live on Maori land and they share that with them through the Treaty of Waitangi. And because we don't have a treaty here, I have people that literally think, oh, we conquered you, so it's all right. And it's like, well, that's not the best logic because China might just, the CCP might just decide the same logic one day, which is there is no rules based order. There is no sovereignty of any country that's important. Might is right, and we're going to take Australia. And then what would those same people say? Oh, well, it's fine. It's fine. Might is right to come on in. So there's sort of a lack of empathy towards Aboriginal people in this country. There's a lack of education. And I think I have this involuntary urge that just comes out of me to pull people up when they start being silly. And again, there's so many redeemable qualities in people that say and do silly things. I just want them to focus on those things and less of the racism.
Awesome. Jimmy, this has been a really, really enlightening conversation, man. Thank you very much for your time. And yeah, man, all is good. I'll tag you in this when it's ready. And yeah, man, be good to yourself. Have a great
Well,
day.
if you're not doing anything on the 14th of May,
Hmm.
no, June,
Yep, yep, yep.
Brisbane. You're playing
Yeah,
in
man.
Brisbane, and I could really put a 6'7" army trained weightlifter. I could find some good use. I reckon I might need a bit of security backup, brother.
Sounds good, mate. All right, mate.
Thanks,
Be good.
thanks, Tom. Have a great
See you
day.
then.
Balu.